Let's get ready to rumble! You can't handle the truth.
Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, advocates the murder, the assassination of Vlad Putin. In a tweet, he wrote, "Is there a Brutus in Russia? Is there a more successful Colonel Stauffenberg in the Russian military? The only way this ends is if somebody in Russia will take this guy out. You're going to be doing your country and the world a great service." So, a sitting U.S. senator proposes an illegal international act of war. We do not have a formal declaration of war with Russia, and the last time I checked, not only are we not at war with Russia, we're still buying oil from them, and we're not only still buying oil from them, we are in negotiations with Russia because they are representing us, the United States, to Iran in a new Iranian nuclear deal. You know, the one that President Donald J. Trump put an end to, and now Joe Biden wants reinstated under the terms that are acceptable and agreeable, of course, to Iran. And we're using Vlad Putin and Russia to broker that deal. Do you get what's happening? You've got Lindsey Graham, the absolute warmonger who would have us perpetually at war with somebody all the time, has no problem ever jumping onto whatever cause to send your sons into battle for your children to die. That'll never happen to his family members. They'll be protected. But you, the peasant class, I'm telling you, Lindsey Graham is a closeted, I am convinced he and John McCain they had a very special friendship. But it's not just merely that. It's the fact that he is a two-faced rhino and he is just beyond stupid. When he was questioned about this today, he said, this really is the only way it ends. So there was no backing off of it. There was no apology. It was a doubling down. So we have an elected U.S. official now publicly calling for the assassination of the leader of another nation. Now again, I thought we were so upset with Vlad Putin because he has desecrated the sovereignty of another nation. Well, here we are with a nation that not only are we not at war with, but we're in bed with financially. Nancy Botox Pelosi yesterday talked about, I would support an absolute ban on buying oil from Russia. It needs to stop. But of course, she has no problem with us negotiating to buy that oil from Iran. When she was asked, well, what about opening up our own oil wells rather than the strategic oil supply? Her whole incomprehensible, the president has already released 30 million barrels, which is about a 3-day supply. But they don't want to do any more drilling. They're not going to tap. They're not going to open up. We're going to punish our oil industry while we reward Vlad Putin. And if we stop rewarding Vlad Putin, because, we've confiscated a few yachts, we might, stop buying our oil from him. Then we're going to start awarding the Iranians who we're letting Vlad Putin broker a nuclear deal with. And at what point does Lindsey Graham and the West and us acknowledge the fact we created a lot of this mess? Oh, yes, we did. In 2014, when Barack Obama was directly involved in the overthrow of a duly elected government in Ukraine because they tended to still favor Russia more than the West, well, that couldn't stand. So we got that regime out. We put in another regime, which eventually led to the election of Zelensky, Wakinski, Karpinski, whatever ski. And by the way, for those of you that keep texting and tweeting, you should learn his name. I know his name. Do you not understand sarcasm? So Karpinski, Zelensky, Watinsky, whatever ski. The reason, by the way, I do this, and I hate the fact that I have to take the time to explain this for the one or two because everybody else gets it. Nobody really knew who Zelensky was until a week ago. And yet now we have made him the poster child of freedom, and he's moved me to tears, and it's, fill in the blank, etc., etc., etc. You do know this guy has jailed his political opponents, right? You do know this guy is responsible for the deaths of people in the Dunbar region. You know that, right? You know that, right? You do know that this guy is just not at the same level of criminality and cruelty as Vlad Putin. But yet all of a sudden now we're ready to make him the poster child of what democracy looks like. But then again, you probably think, Justin Trudeau is a swell guy too, even when he enacted martial law and stripped all those truck drivers of their rights, their freedoms, access to their money, lost their driver's licenses, insurance, etc., etc., etc. And he did it with the stroke of a pen. So we have a president who won't defend our borders, but he wants us to defend the Ukrainian borders, but he's really not going to. We've seized a few yachts, we talk about sanctions, but in reality, Putin is in association now and partnership with China. We aren't talking about doing anything to China. We aren't kicking Chinese products out of our country. We're not boycotting anything.
Governor Mike DeWine in Ohio demanded that all the liquor stores in Ohio stop selling Russian-made vodka.
Wow. I'll bet that was just an absolute shot to the heart of Russia. What are we going to do? Mike DeWine in the Rust Belt of Ohio won't buy our vodka anymore. You do know this is all theater, right? We've gone from the theater of COVID, the theater of masking, the theater of lockdowns and fear, and having Fear Mouchy Fauci Stein out there every day scaring everybody out of their minds. All of a sudden, that's all done. 70-year-old congressmen can sit next to each other without masks indoors and hug each other and act like it's 2019. But school-age children that the virus is virtually non-existent as a threat to, they're still under masks and lockdown. Theater? That's all it is. And now we've got the new Ukrainian theater. On the one hand, I am sure the Democrats and Republicans are feverishly using this to raise money, and they're all wearing their little Ukraine flags and stand with Ukraine. And by the way, as a pastor, I can tell you that our church is directly involved with Samaritan's Purse to help the people of Ukraine. I don't give a flip about the government of Ukraine. We're going to help them get some medical supplies and a hospital in there. And of course, yes, the gospel. Other than that, I'm not going to lift one finger, and I do not want one drop of American blood spilled to save the backside of President Zelensky, Lazinski, Karpinski, Warchinsky, whatever ski. Because he is just as corrupt and vile as Vlad Putin. He just doesn't have the clout and the connections that a Vlad Putin does. Who, by the way, is creating his own parallel universe. You get that, right? Everybody talks about we're isolating him and he won't be able to interact and trade with the world anymore. Bullhawk, he won't. He and China are going to form an alliance. And the bottom line is, he may come out of this even stronger than he went into it. And you know who you can thank? The geniuses in the West who constantly lead us into these same dead-end, endless wars. These are the people that drafted the entire policy of what to do in the Middle East, and look what we've done there. The regimes we've toppled, the dissettlement that we have brought there, the unstabilization of that entire region on us. And now, what we did back in 2014 under Barack Obama with Joe the Blunder Biden as his boy wonder sidekick as the VP, we toppled a regime duly elected in Ukraine, put our own in. That, of course, led to the eventual election of a stand-up comic, and the whole thing was, hey, you want to be part of the West, right? You want our products, you want our stuff, you want Hollywood, you want the movies, and Ukraine fell for it. And they pumped a lot of money into the pockets of people like Hunter Biden for Joe Biden, all with the false hope that, well, if big bad Vlad Putin ever tries to come after us, The West will save us. And now all of a sudden they're hit with the reality of nope, not going to happen. Number one, we don't want blood of Americans spilled over there when this is really, and some of you are going to go incensed when I say this, an overdue, long overdue, it's a civil war. It really is. I mean, I get Ukraine is a sovereign nation, but understand there was a connection between they and Russia under the Soviet flag, and Vlad Putin said 20 years ago he was going to put the Soviet states back together. Why everybody is shocked by this, I don't know. And again, he did this with Crimea, and there was narrow words said about it. And I'm not saying what he's doing is right, and I see the humanitarian crisis that this is, and President Donald Trump said yesterday it's a Holocaust, it's a genocide, and it is. And it's awful, and I feel bad. And you know Zelensky was counting on Biden, who he bought and paid for, and the NATO nations that he had been cozying up to and buying all their stuff and buying into the Western culture. And I think he's finally come to the realization, you've been hung out to dry. Now, there are some things we could do that I would support. We could give them, I am sure that our military knows exactly where all the Russian troops are. You know they've got GPS beads on all of them. You could share that information with the Ukrainian military so that you're better able to defend yourselves. But again, the Ukrainian military is made up of neo-Nazis. So when you talk about Vlad Putin, bad guy, Zelensky, good guy, Zelensky the Nazi? And what are our fearless leaders doing? Well, Lindsey Graham is saying, let's assassinate Putin. That right there is an act of war. And now we find out Vice President Harris is flying to Poland. Why? So she can make an already disaster an even bigger crisis? Because we know every time she opens her mouth, she says exactly the wrong thing. And then when they cackle laugh, so we're going to unleash this buffoon on Europe. Maybe that's a great place to just leave her. Maybe Air Force Two can run out of fuel there and just be stuck and keep her there. But for Lindsey Graham, you people in South Carolina, please primary him and bounce him. Do not send him back to South Carolina. And don't worry, he'll be fine. Faux pas News, formerly known as Fox News, they'll hire him as an analyst like Trader Gowdy, and he'll go on the air and pretend to be a conservative Republican, when in reality, he is just an absolute salivating, ejaculating warmonger. That's what gets him off. Not defending the Constitution, not true conservatism, not doing what's right for you. The idea that we're at war and he can kind of be in charge, and that's Lindsey Graham. He's an imbecile, and he's a dangerous one at that. On the other hand, at some point, we have got to accept the fact that we literally baited Ukraine into this. We were poking the bear. We were daring Putin. Don't you do it. If you do, there'll be serious consequences. And the whole time Ukraine is thinking, this will be great. America will save us. And that's not going to happen. Because we're buying oil. And Biden has no intention of opening up our oil spigots. And when I hear people on the left like AOC say things like, this is just going to just more reason why we have to get off our dependency of fossil fuel. Well, I got news for you, dingbat. Our vehicles, our planes, our cars, our trucks, our stuff does not run on fairy dust and unicorn piss. It runs on gas. And to talk about, we're going to have all electric cars, great, so we're going to rape the earth of coal, because you know what's needed to make the batteries for all of this rechargeable electrical stuff? You're never going to do away with fossil fuel. All you are doing is lying to yourself and trying to figure out which fossil fuel you're going to replace for something else. And by the way, if we start to use all the coal for all of these endless battery packs and battery supplies that are going to be needed, even making of solar panels at some point, the coal that we use to make steel, what are we going to make buildings out of? Peanut butter? We have been given a natural resource of oil. The wheels of democracy, the arsenal of freedom, has been driven by oil. I know some of you on the left really don't want to hear that. This is about big profits for the big oil. Blah, blah. Really? So you heat your house with wood? You ride a bicycle or a rickshaw everywhere? You don't ever get on a train or a plane? If there's anything in your life that requires oil, like the computer that you're using, the camera that you're using to make your video blogs, all contain, what's that substance? Plastic, which comes from oil. But Lindsey Graham's solution to all this, let's just execute Vlad Putin. It's the only way this ends. And that was his whole thing. This is the only way this ends. Really? Who replaces Vlad? Maybe it's somebody 100 times worse. You know, sometimes it's better to go with the devil you know than the devil you don't know. But again, these are the same people that led us into a 20-year war in the Middle East, and now we're listening to anything they have to say about this. Once again, we bear a lot of responsibility here. I'm not excusing anything that Putin has done or is doing, but let's get real here. We goaded him, we poked him, we wanted this to happen so we could be, quote unquote, the big saviors and get everybody talking about anything but the Biden failures. And Ukraine, the whole time, all that money they gave Joe. But I got news for you. China gave Joe a lot more. We don't call him Beijing Biden for nothing. And what is the Biden administration or the U.S. talking about with regard to sanctions and punishing of China for helping Russia? Nada. Nothing. They're not going to. And we're really not going to do anything to Russia. This is all theater. Pure theater. And sadly, a lot of innocent people are paying the price for this. And if Vlad Putin stopped listening to the news media on CNN, PMSNBC, Fox News, who keep talking about he's in a quagmire, he's bogged down, it's this problem, that problem. If this man really decides to bring the hammer down, it's over. And we share responsibility in that. Because we made them promises that we had no intention of keeping. They were counting on us to physically come do this for them. And I am sure on more than one phone call and with more than one deal, they were promised that repeatedly. And now NATO has walked away. We're not going to get involved. And at some point, Zelensky, you want to save your hide? Why don't you finally throw these guys all under the bus and tell the world how you were lied to? And then somehow we need to broker some type of a peaceful arrangement. Sad, sad, sad. And that we are led by the likes and the ilk of a Lindsey Graham.